Welcome to Building Belonging. My name is Dana Rey Tovar, and I work for the Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at the City Bar. It is not a secret that DEI has been everywhere lately. Everyone's talking about DEI. But what is DEI? And most importantly, what is not DEI? So in this episode, we talk about things such as what I like to call unfact-checked DEI, which is something that we've been seeing a lot on social media lately. I personally have seen certain creators online talking about what they think DEI is and how it divides rather than including. Pretty much the same argument behind Student for Fair Admissions, the Supreme Court ruling that ended affirmative action in higher education. We've also heard how people claim that DEI benefits quote unquote unqualified people just based on race, for example. This is what I like to call unfact-checked DEI, changing the rhetoric to benefit certain agenda. This also allows creators to turn things around and use their definition of DEI to attack marginalized communities. And it is important to discuss what DEI actually is, because if this weaponization of DEI continues, that is only doing a disservice to the core values, principles, and goals of DEI. So get ready to listen, grab your coffee, bring a friend, because we're breaking down DEI for you.
Welcome to Building Belonging, a podcast of the New York City Bar Association and its Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar. The idea for this one was that we were going to try to keep developing the idea of what DEI is by now talking about what DEI isn't, especially those things that get called DEI. But our, to borrow Tanya's expression, BooBoo, DooDoo, because we talk a lot about that. We talk about that stuff all the time. People who are full of shit or just out there for themselves trying to capitalize on, DEI, because DEI got really big in the corporate world. And a lot of people seized on it.
Air quotes big, right? Like it got big.
Right. That people who have bad intentions would seize on just to make themselves look good. It became a thing that people who maybe had good intentions but just didn't know any better would speak the language of without really, coming up with anything effective, or even in worst case scenarios, trying their best and then ultimately doing things that were damaging to people anyway. And people going out there, and just being like, I'm doing DEI now, when they have no training and no knowledge and just like good intention, which is great, but ultimately can be quite harmful when you're like, sure, I can do this,
Yeah.
And we've talked about how important it is to have a theory of change and to, we love Lily Zhang in this office and, having measurable outcomes to track and being outcome oriented instead of like, I forget how Lily Zhang puts it, but, just sort of like good vibes. A lot of DEI is just good vibes, and that's not really doing anything for anyone. So yeah, I just want to put that out there. I kind of came prepared with the little thing I want to talk about, but I figured, if that sparks anything with any of you, we could get into it.
Well, I just want to say I love the topic because I do think that the more we talk about what DEI is and what it isn't, the better. I want to normalize having this conversation and model having this conversation so that folks feel empowered to have similar conversations in their circles, because I do think there's a real issue at stake here around educating people on DEI, right? And this is why we're having this conversation, because everyone thinks they know what DEI is. And I will tell you, I am very rarely in agreement with what people say. And maybe that's true about what I say about DEI too. And that's why we have to talk about it. And that's why we have to be clear. And I think that, I say this a lot. I've probably said this on other episodes of the podcast already. But for me, DEI is a perfect example of like, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And all these like bandwagon supporters, when it was cute to just like put stuff on your Instagram, like fall away real fast when you're actually confronted with your values and thinking about what this means in practice. And so it is something worth studying, something worth learning, right? Like you can't just do DEI because you care I mean, that you definitely should care, but caring isn't enough, right? Like, I care about a lot of things. I care about medical conditions. That doesn't make me a doctor, right? Like, so it's the same thing with DEI. Just because you want to create change doesn't mean you have the tools or understanding. And so it's really important to be self-aware of where you are in your journey and what's actually supportive of a larger movement. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I love that. Angie, you had a good, I like what you were fleshing out earlier about.
Yeah. And you know what? I took notes because like my Delulu brain, I'm like, I'm going to forget everything. So I like wrote down names so that I remember. But, you know, when I think about DEI that we should start to move away from and like what DEI is misinterpreted as, I like in my head, I call it like sitcom DEI from and before off air. You know, I was like, what sitcom DEI? So that's a term that I'm coining in my brain. But I'm thinking about, and this is a hot take. So, and I might like get some people upset and riled up, but I'm thinking about the show Friends. Okay. And Friends is huge. People love Friends, no hate to Friends, except the whole concept of Friends was taken, like all the episodes were taken from a Black show called Living Single,
which was a much better show, by the way. A much better show. I loved Living Single so much.
So that's like the sitcom, that's the sitcom DI that I'm thinking about. That there was a show that was Friends that is not Friends. Like everyone, like Chandler being like, how many quotes, TV quotes do the general public just like quote to each other because of Friends? Meanwhile, the whole premise of it was taken from a Black show. And that's to me like sitcom DEI. And then the other things that I think about is like the shows and the movies that I grew up watching. Like Lizzie McGuire. Like that was my era, right? Like I would watch Lizzie McGuire and the sitcom DEI is the best friend, the token best friend. And I had to look it up because I didn't want to forget, but Miranda Sanchez was her best friend. So did they put DEI in? Sure. If that's what you consider DEI, like they had DEI in the show. They had your token minority character, how they like to claim it. And then little Angie, growing up watching Lizzie McGuire, you don't clock that until you're older. I'm like, hold up. And for a second, I was like, oh, I feel seen because I'm there. But like, why am I the sidekick? Why can't I have a show? And, you know, it just gets me thinking. And I'm thinking about TV shows that I grew up watching a lot recently because I have my son and I want to make sure that like anything that I show him, I want to make sure that it's not going to indoctrinate him into any type of entitlement thinking or anything like that. So I'm thinking back on shows that I grew up watching, shows that I really loved. And I remembered my favorite show was The Proud Family. I don't know if anyone watched. I'm like, I love The Proud Family. And now as a 34-year-old, I think back like, why did I love The Proud Family so much? And that's because it was good. We had Black and brown characters and a Black family, the Proud Family. They were the focus of the show. And it wasn't like, oh, that's a Black show. Like it was just a cartoon show. And I loved it. I thought it was great. And then one more thing. I know I'm like taking up a lot of space, but these are like all the things that I have coming up in my mind.
For it.
I was trying to watch a movie to watch with my husband. And we're like scrolling through and then we saw a movie called Spanglish, which I had watched years ago with my mom. And my husband, who is Irish, Italian, like very standard New York white, we're watching it. We saw it and he's like, oh, Spanglish, like my life. Because, you know, my family comes into our house and we all speak Spanish and he's like trying to pick up. He's like, Spanglish, like my life. I'm like, let's watch it. That's actually a good movie. And I remember watching it when I was younger, like pre-teens. I remember watching it and there was so much of the story where I got mad at the mother character because like you're taking all this away from your daughter. I remember getting mad at that time, but now as a 34-year-old and watching it, it's just fresh eyes. And that movie does a great job at illustrating a story that isn't told often. And like when I think about like sitcom DEI, the poo-poo is like sorry, Lizzie McGuire, but like the Lizzie McGuire, right? And if you want to watch something that's authentic, that's genuine, I highly recommend watching Spanglish. But that's all I got. Someone else take the line.
I really like that, Angie, and it's reminding me of, I want to make a connection to something else I was hoping we talked about in this episode, which may seem like, bear with me, but we talk a lot about like diversity training and how problematic it can be because of the wide range of quality of programming out there, but also because so many companies, entities, people are like, okay, I got trained and now I'm done. And that's a problem. Like, that's not DEI. That's maybe the first step towards learning about DEI and what it is and how you might do it, but it's not doing DEI. And I feel like those, that kind of goes with what you were saying about tokenism and sitcom DEI, because it both speak to, I think this is like a pretty prevailing sentiment in the conversation right now that we don't speak to all the time, but like a lot of people just want to follow the rules. They just want to know what the rules are and they want to follow them so they don't get in trouble, which I get. Ultimately, I do really get. I think a lot about like the boomers in my life who are, late to the game and are just like, I don't want to get canceled. I don't want to I'm like, are you on Twitter? Who's canceling you? What are you talking about? And they're just like, they just want to know what the rules are so they don't get in trouble. And that's not what DEI is. It's not just knowing the rules and following the rules. It's a much more systemic, holistic thing, enterprise, work. And so I think a lot of the DEI that is performative in this way is like, look, we're following the rules. You said we had to have a person of color in here, and we do. We got one. It's like, no, that's not it. There's no quota. And it's weird that, a lot of the people who are pushing back against DEI now explicitly or implicitly are like, well, there are these quotas and it's not fair and it's biased and it's racist and it's all, we're like, nobody who's worth a damn doing DEI is talking about quotas. We're talking about, follow, just getting everybody to like follow this rule or have the right number of, people who meet a certain criteria in positions, et cetera, et cetera. It's like much, much more complex and nuanced. And I'm definitely waving goodbye to that, like to all this stuff. Hopefully that's just trying to help people feel better about themselves, and who are not dealing with their own discomfort because they just want to feel like they're following the rules.
I want to add on to that because you're saying like following the rules. And listen, I'm surrounded by boomers also that are like, what are the rules? But then I'm also surrounded by boomers that like they weaponize the rules. And you can't see because this is a podcast, so I'm doing air quotes. Like they weaponize.
We're gonna find Dana and I will find a sound effect for your air quotes.
Right? But you know what I'm talking about? Where they're just like, well, we're following the rules. We're following the rules. It's like, actually, like, no, like now you're just weaponizing it and you're being damaging and insulting and like, get out of here. Like, you're not a part of the conversation. It's just, I feel like that comes up in the media quite often, and where they weaponize the messages that we're trying to put forward. And so much of inclusion and belonging is taken out of context so that they could for their sound bites.
Yeah, I would like to chime in here because I feel like in the beginning I was pretty much like thinking what kind of DEI were we invited to, right? And the conversation started and like I started having like light bulb moments, like thinking back about like the experiences I've had like personally with DEI when like working for the office. And I like what you guys were saying reminded me of this very specific moment that I was doing some research about firms, and they talked about their board and they said we're very diverse. Like it was literally in their website. We're very diverse. We have 3 women on board. And that's to me, like that brings me to what I'm waving by is also Lily Sang talks about it on their book, that kind of DEI that's harmful and they think they're doing something good, but at the end of the day, they're only harming more people. And that brings me to my other point about, I think, Tanya, you said something 2 summers ago about disruption. And then it's funny because with my friends, we talk about it a lot, about your quotes, the Tanya quotes. We should have like a whole section of Tanya quotes. But yeah, like thinking about like following the rules, and maybe DEI is about disruption. And I don't know, it was just a light bulb moment that I had, that DEI is not following those rules, right? And that brings me to my other point. I hope I'm making sense here. I just took notes. Another type of DEI that completely and want to say bye is unfact check DEI, because people in media and the media and like on TikTok and like everywhere, they love to talk about what they think DEI is, and they need to like understand, like, and that's why what you were saying, Tony, it's so important to have these conversations, because, and like what you said, Eli, like everything's connected, right? They think they had one training and they're ready, they're DI professionals, when it takes much more than that. And I personally don't feel I have all the tools, and I'm still like in a constant learning every day. So if I say anything that doesn't make sense, please let me know. But yeah, just waving goodbye to that kind of, it's performative DI at the end of the day. And that makes me think, and I actually think about it more times than I think I realized. Do you guys remember that email that we got 2 summers ago about like the affirmative action? And that to me was like, it was pretty, it was wrong. Like everything was wrong. And I think about it a lot. And, but that makes me think about like the unfact check DEI. Like they think they're actually doing something. They think they're saying something that's going to help people. But at the end of the day, it's just feeling this rhetoric that's hurting people more. So that is my 2 cents. My very,
Can you unpack a little bit about like what the fact check DEI is that you see? Like what are they doing? What do people do that fall into that category?
yeah, I think it's just echoing what we think, it's like following the rules, like whatever. Like for example, what I said about the firm having like, we're super pro DEI. We have 3 women on board.
Mhm.
But that type of DEI that they think, that they understand, because it's like talked about before. Well, if you have one person of color in the show, you're doing DEI. That's not like, that's in my head what's not fact check. Like you need to like understand that's not what it is, and we should move very much away from it.
Like when I like Dana, you were saying like fact checking DEI, like all of that, and what was like coming up to mind, like top of mind for me, and we have been on so many calls with like, I'm an ally. I'm an ally. Listen, I'm an ally. And like I think about, and I'm like always about the shows, but like that's what I do in my spare time now, guys. So in Avid Elementary, like one of the characters, he's a white male teacher. He's a lovable character. And he, like, you can see, like, if you're watching with a different type of perspective, right? If you have done the work and you're watching, you can appreciate this character's growth between like the seasons. And like there's things that like I clock that obviously like my husband's not clocking the way that I am, because he's just not watching it the way that I watch it. But like, it was like, and there's this one line where in a recent episode, he was saying, allies are seen, not heard. And I thought that was hilarious. And Dana, you were saying like fact checking DEI, and I immediately went to our allies that are heard, and they're heard way more than seen. And then I think about like that character that said allies are seen, not heard. Like I wish more people were seen, not heard. I feel like that's where you were going.
I was thinking more like past the DEI that we're waving goodbye to, and more like the like kind of what you were referring to, Dana, with like the like bad faith arguments and like following the rules, and just like I've gotten past the point of wanting to win everyone over with like, well, if you would just see it this way, and like here are the facts, and like everyone just needs that one moment where their aha moment, and like maybe I can bring it to them. And like, no, I'm done getting stuck back there, and I have been for a while, but I think now more than ever, like, the work has to keep going. We have to keep doing it, whether or not everyone is on board. And so, yeah, waving goodbye to all the conversations that you're just kind of there to derail it, or the bad faith conversations that folks might want to have with you. Definitely had lots of practice over the years. And I think I'm very good at now spotting them before they come up. And I have my ready to go answers that end with like, and I'm not engaging. But I think putting them more into practice is where I'm headed.
I really resonate with that, Mary Ellen. And again, I feel like, every day is different, and where I am on the spectrum and what my capacity is on any given day, especially just given the roller coaster that is the world right now. But I will say this, and I think over the last year, the thing that I have felt has shifted the most in me in thinking about all of this, including the performative stuff and the bad faith stuff, or just plain ignorance, is I think tapping into my education, my compassion, and my capacity to hold multiple complex ideas in my head at the same time. And I say that because I want to give it the time, space, and attention I really do think navigating a really complex world needs, right? A lot of it for me recently has been about making sure I remember my limitations and the ways that I was that person on the other side at some point. My ideas or actions or failure to live my values out loud, right? And not that I've gotten down to science even still, right? I think this is a lifelong endeavor. And so I've been pushing myself, and I'm saying it like push is the right word, because I don't think it's as easy as people think it is, but pushing myself to have compassion for people who are saying really ignorant things or doing really ignorant things. And again, I'm not always capable. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm always capable, but I am trying to be. I think October 7th has really pushed me there, especially around Israel, Gaza. I think that I need to believe that intelligent, compassionate, thoughtful people who care about these issues in every way need to be able to come together and have difficult conversations. And if we cannot, then who will? And so I apply that to everything on these issues, right? And I think my idea around what qualifies for like oppressive or violent, even, I'm using air quotes a lot, sorry, behavior has.
I said we're gonna have
we need one. We need some sound effects.
For the air quotes.
We need some sound effects. I love this. Yes, multiple sound effects, please.
You got it, dude.
But yeah, I think my idea about that has changed a lot as well. In a way that I think for some on first hearing might think is too expansive, but I don't see a way around it, frankly. And it's this idea of like, anytime your aim is to coerce someone or to convince someone, you are not acting in their best interest. And again, that doesn't mean that like I don't want to educate people and help guide them and help them think about things differently. But if your agenda is to change someone's mind against their will, you will fail. And you will actually do more harm. And so your point, Mary Ellen, about like sussing out who is worth engaging with these conversations is one I have often. And there's times I just like look at the person, listen to what they're saying, and I make a calculus. I'm like, is this my moment to help someone think about this? Or am I only going to make this person more defensive? And again, I have failed miserably many a time trying to do this. And I feel like the only way you learn how to do it is by messing it up and, learning some discernment. And so like I have failed as many times as I have been successful, and I'm continuing to learn how to do that. But it's something that I am intentionally doing, because I don't think that just trying to proselytize people at all times is the way to go. For anyone. It's not good for you. You're wasting your energy. You could be putting it on yourself. You're creating another defensive person who's just going to create a whole new narrative about why you're wrong and they're right. And you're losing the opportunity to really get someone curious. Because I think it's way more effective to ask the right questions, to say the thing that will open someone's curiosity, to look for the answers themselves. And that's really hard to do all the time.
Love that.
Yeah, I think that makes me think about getting into this work is really easy to like have moments and also want to change the world. And that's something that is it takes a toll in people because it's like, how do you even identify like who you want to have these conversations with? So that's one thing that I wanted to say, that it's really easy, or like seeing like my experience getting engaged with this work and also all the people that I've seen getting engaged for the first time. I just want to like get back to it, but also try and make the change. But it's so hard, and just one person, they're not, like, it's not. So like, how do you like? It's back to the idea that we've been discussing this week in multiple meetings. Is how do you feel if like other people's cup without filling yours first? So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But I was thinking that also part of the DEI, like engaging with DEI, is understanding that people have to let their guard down. And because compassion and understanding is so important. And I think it goes both ways for the person that's getting into DEI for the first time and also for people who have been doing it for a long time. Because it's like, you don't know if they've had the resources before or the tools to understand this. So in this hard conversation that are necessary, there's also an implication of having, I think that's emotional intelligence, I don't know, but like understanding where people are coming from. And yeah, so like part of it is also for both ways, I think, getting comfortable with unlearning. And that's, I think, one of my biggest takeaways from DEI is getting comfortable with unlearning and learning how things really are. And, just let the guard down and move away from their egos and understand that maybe things haven't been a certain way for you, but like for other people, they're completely different. So yeah, those are notes that I've been taking hearing you guys talk, but that's wheels are turning.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like that's something I've learned being in this space, being in, Tanya's orbit, Angie, Marielle, like coming into ODEB, learning, really more of like what that means. Actually, I want to, take this opportunity to throw in another idea that I was hoping to bring into this conversation about just sort of how people talk about DEI work, justice work, what it is and what it isn't. I have a lot of difficulty sometimes knowing where the line is, and I want to support people who are speaking up and speaking out and calling bullshit when it's needed. And at the same time, I get frustrated with people who get so focused on that part of things that they forget the work of it. And it's just about, I don't know what it's about. I think I find myself thinking like it's really about punishment. It's like, not just that I need to speak up and say you're wrong. I need you to be, we need to get this. Like that's kind of where like the cancel culture part of it comes in. And there is, it is a lack of compassion ultimately there. It is I think there is some kind of like failure to see yourself even, and, each person's situation within the bigger conversation in the work, and like having that sort of compassion for people who are getting it wrong. Because like, even if we were able to punish all the people who messed up or said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing, like where would that really get us? The example I wanted to bring in with this one, because I really still am struggling with this, is Target. And I have to acknowledge right at the top that like, I like going to Target. We were talking about this and, privately amongst ourselves a little while ago. Like, I definitely have that bias of just like, oh man, like I hope I don't have to boycott Target now. But that is what's happening. And I sort of go back and forth between this sense of like, I think at first I was like, looking at the record, Target seemed to be making an effort. And they did seem to have laid out some goals, measurable goals, which we love, and try to do the work as a big, show willingness to like get in the game. And then it was really disappointing when they, flipped on that stuff and walked it back. And like, I don't want to make it okay that they did that, but they're just trying out here like everyone else, it seems like. And it seems like a lot of the at first I was like, boycott, like, are we just trying to punish them for messing up? And then at the same time, it's like, well, we have to hold people accountable. We have to take a stand somewhere. And I don't really know what to think. And so I was just kind of trying to put those thoughts out there and see what you all thought about it. Is the reaction to Target that we've been seeing this sort of like compassionate but firm holding people to account and calling bullshit where we need to call bullshit? Or is it more about punishment and anger and taking it out on, somebody who got caught in the crossfire?
Yeah, I mean, these are really good questions. And I think that, well, first of all, I should mention, if you think you loved Target, you should have seen me pre-list at Target. Okay? That little $1, like under $5 section, we're like, that's like, I literally just like go there and get 5 of everything because I use it for I should say I used to. They definitely lost me as a customer, and I am absolutely boycotting that. I hope they hear me. I will never buy from you again, because I do think that there is a difference between calling someone out, calling someone in, stopping harm in its tracks versus harming someone because they messed up one time. Target is not a person. Target is a corporation that has been abusive of their employees and communities that they occupy, like lots of corporations. Target is not like different in that way. And to your point, Eli, I think like Target was a leader in many ways around leading the charge on DEI things for a while, which is why that like betrayal hurt, I think, a little bit more. But I think there's a couple of things I want to point out about the Target situation. And I want to like wag my finger at all of us now, because Target was being attacked for their DEI stance for years before this happened.
Yeah.
And instead of jumping to their defense and supporting them legally or with protests or making sure that these attacks stopped, we allowed those attacks to hurt their employees, not even the corporation, even though I think they may have lost some money or stock prices may have fallen during this time. But I remember what concerned me was that their employees, people, regular everyday people at Target, were being threatened and harassed for Target's quote unquote DEI policies and having quote unquote woke stuff at their stores. Like I bought them
just
first.
to add a little context, there was, I think this was around like in the Pride Month thing a couple of years ago, maybe.
Correct. Correct.
Pride themed products, and make that needs its own sort of unpacking, but people would like come into the stores.
That's right. And what did we do? We allowed that. We allowed that to happen as a society. We didn't punish the people who were causing harm. We punished the people being harmed. And this is what resulted. So we're all kind of complicit in this. And yes, are we punishing Target? Absolutely. We are punishing Target. And, I do think that one of the things, or two of the things that we see working right now in these corporate states of America is boycotting and is unionizing, because it's one of the few ways we can actually create more representation for all of our voices. So I don't know if that answered everything, but I did want to just bring in the point that like what happened in Target actually started years ago. And I think we also need to point the fingers at ourselves.
Yeah, well, it's also not really about getting an answer on this. I appreciate, the nuance and the context that you're bringing to this question or the situation. Like you have to consider the whole picture. And I think part of what I'm trying to get at here is the way that intention matters, and context matters. And it's hard to know sometimes how much people who are speaking on a certain topic are considering context and considering intention and what their goals are, and I say, it shouldn't be about punishment. Like I also, boycotts are a very effective tool for change, and they are about punishing certain entities for doing the wrong thing. And that is an appropriate method sometimes. And sometimes when it's just about, you know, slapping the face of somebody who pissed you off, then it's not so good. You know, when it's just about punishment, like that's what I mean when I say it's just about punishment. You know, what are your goals really? If it's just to grind your enemy into the dirt, you're not helping anyone. If it's to affect change, you know, by applying pressure, that's something else. But that really is about, you know, it's just like the intention of, a lot of times, just the intention of the person or the group. Those measures.
You know, it's like you were like in on a therapy session. Like I have like a devil, like the little devil on my shoulders. Like, but why can't I do both? Like, why can't I do them? Why can't I do both? Like,
it feels good to stand over your vanquished enemies.
I would. Why can't we do both? But like, no, Angie, no. For those who can't see, like I'm slapping myself on the hand. Like, no, you can't do that. And I think it's important. I think the topic that you bring up of like punishment, I think that mindset is what really we gave the other side a weapon, because so much of our society, like cancel culture, like we focus so much more on the punishment rather than the outcome. And I think because we all became like a mob, right? Like with our pitchforks, like we became that mob. We gave the other side something, a weapon that they could use against us and pie in our face for it. So I think, and this is something that I have to like, that I work on, because I'm in my mind, I'm like, why can't we do that? Like, why can't we punish them too? I like that. But I like, you know, it's like, and you rationalize it. You're like, no, but that's just like justice being served. Like, I just want justice to be served. Like, do you, Angie, do you want justice to be served, or do you want to just like laugh and say,
That's such a good point. And that's that quote, you know, that famous quote, like, be careful when you're fighting that you don't become the monster you're trying to defeat, right? And that it's very that. Like, we're either for these principles or we're not.
Right. And when I say we, I mean the collective we, right? Like not our team, obviously, but like we so badly like our mission was inclusion and belonging, that we excluded because we focused more on the punishment rather than the outcome. And now now we're dealing with the monster that we have to create.
I don't know if we were the only creators of it. I feel like I feel like punishing people has just been a root cause of evil at all times in history. But I understand the point you're saying. And I think you're right. There are no clean hands in this. Ever. There's never been clean hands across the board anywhere. And that's something we have to accept, including ourselves. We have all been the problematic person at some point in some way in our lives. And I'm sure we'll be the problematic person in the future as well, in some cases, in some way or form. And so in uplifting ourselves and each other, we need to remember that, right? There needs to be a redemption arc for everyone. Because if not, where are we progressing to? We can't cut people out. We can't leave them behind. We can't bury them. If we do that, we are part of the problem as well. And so it's like there needs to be acceptance of mistakes. There needs to be acceptance of not knowing everything.
Yeah, there's the pull quote. Look out for that clip on your LinkedIn accounts, everyone.
I think, Angie, now we're in each other's brains. Because I was thinking about like the whole like notion of punishment and like, are you doing the work to punish people who aren't, or are you, in any sense, boycotting or whatever you're doing, or are you actually trying to like affect change? Do you actually believe in the change that you're supposedly working toward? And I think on the like the other side, whoever that other side is they feel like DEI is a punishment for being whoever they are. And so, of course, if we're being punished, it's because they want to punish us, and so we want to punish them back, and it's a whole ugly cycle. And I think we just need to like extract ourselves from that and look more toward like who is the serving, and how do we get closer to what we're actually doing instead of getting bogged down in the details and punishing each other. And I mean, I love a good boycott. I've been boycotting everything that even looks a little bit wrong since as long as I can remember. But I think for me, it's become more about like, do I feel good about giving this organization, this store, whatever, my money and if it's $5 and it's not going to make a difference to them, but how do I feel about it? So I think reframing boycott for, obviously it's a tool for collective action, but if you're not sure about it, there's also a very like personal, individual element to it is worth exploring.
I love that. And Mary Ellen, you're reminding me how much we all talk about the way that the DEI movement is an inheritor of the civil rights movement. And I'm sort of now putting together the pieces of like the nonviolent tradition of the civil rights movement, and also how much more we are able in this era to cut each other down with words, like person to person, you know? And I think maybe that's kind of a through line of what we've been talking about here today is like, when we speak out, are we trying to do violence to each other with our words, or are we trying to make change? Like that's another way of thinking about it, you know, and what does it really mean to embrace nonviolence in justice and change work in 2025?
And, you know, this concept is one that I grapple with on a personal level in so many ways. Because while I do agree that this harkens back to the nonviolence, and you can see how it's connected. You can even see how it's connected to traditional and more ancient cultures, right? And that's why I say, for me, it's something I grapple with on a personal level. Like, you know, I'm Dominican and Puerto Rican. My people were literally the first people to encounter the colonialism that resulted in all of this, right? Columbus landed on Hispaniola first. It was my ancestors who were massacred by him first. And what we know about those peoples, and again, there are, you know, remnants of it in Hispaniola and parts of the Caribbean, but the Arawak folks still do exist in many places, including the Caribbean, but in other countries as well. But what we know about that time is that the particular indigenous people that Columbus encountered in Hispaniola were known to be peaceful. They were known to not be a warring people. They had decided as a culture that they will not go to war with others. And they had like other tribes that were related to them, also Arawak, but were known to engage in war and to do those things. But these particular people were not, and they were slaughtered, and they were made fun of for it. Like if you read the diary entries of Columbus and some of the people who came with him, and I'm thinking specifically of Bartolomeu de las Casas, and he writes in agony, like, these people just want to help us. They want to understand. They want community. And what they're doing is just killing them and laughing at them and thinking them less than. And so for me, it's like, I feel like I carry that legacy in me and I'm grappling with it. And I have to exist for something more than that, right? Like, yes, I want to be compassionate and share love and be accepting and forgiving. And I don't want to be a consequence of that. I don't want someone to be able to take advantage of that. I want to break that curse. So like in my love and peace and compassion that I want to bring to this work, I also want to bring fight and I want to bring protection. Like, I don't think that moving in a peaceful movement means that we don't fight. I think we absolutely do have to fight because otherwise they will be fighting and we will not be.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think that was really such an amazing conversation. And yeah, and thank you all for listening.
I think that's full stop.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Building Belonging. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar.
DEI work really brings a lot of joy and beautiful things into this world. But it is not a secret that in today's world and political climate, DEI practitioners face a lot of hate and backlash. And after listening to this episode, you might be feeling excited about the kind of DEI that we are leaving behind and for the future of DEI. But if we really want to get into that conversation, we have to talk about all the direct hate and threats that DEI practitioners get almost every day. Has it ever happened to you that you're on a Saturday morning doing your little morning walk, enjoying some time with your family, or sipping your morning coffee, and then you get this horrific voicemail to your work phone? Well, that's exactly what happened to our executive director. Recently, she received a very hateful, violent, and threatening voicemail. So in the next episode, we break down our reactions to receiving the message, because it is important to shed light into this kind of things that no one's really talking about in the DEI world. So we want you to take this opportunity to keep supporting us, keep supporting our office, our work, and stay connected. So turn your notifications on to be the very first one to hear that episode as soon as it comes out.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. Find more City Bar podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, iHeart, or at our website at www.nycbar.org/podcasts. Be sure to check out This Lawyer's Life, a professional development podcast where we talk with lawyers about seizing opportunities, learning lessons the hard way, and about what makes them tick. This podcast was produced and edited by Eli Cohen and Dana Ray Tovar.